Late-night adult stories. Sexual desire. Love of lust. Part 9. Secret affair with Michael. The first time Michael and I met in the library, it was a rainy Thursday evening. The tall windows were streaked with silvery rivulets, and the lamps cast a warm glow across the rows of leather-bound books. I had slipped away after dinner under the pretense of organizing the genealogy volumes, but my heart knew the truth. I was drawn by the promise of his presence. He sat at a heavy oak table, a single brass lamp illuminating his features in soft relief. His dark hair was damp at the temples, and a well-worn copy of Keats lay open before him. When I stepped in, he looked up, those warm eyes narrowing with pleasure. "Mary," he said, voice low, "I was hoping you'd come." I gave a small smile, setting the genealogies aside. "I thought you might need help." He closed the book and gestured to the seat opposite. The oak chair creaked as I sat, our knees almost touching under the table. The scent of old paper and mahogany filled the air, a heady, intoxicating mix. We spoke in quiet tones about the volumes scattered around us, but each word carried an undercurrent of tension. When he leaned forward to point out a family crest, his fingertips brushed mine. The spark was immediate, warmer, more urgent than anything I had felt before. I felt a tremor run through me, and I swallowed hard against the sudden dryness in my throat. Minutes stretched as we moved from books to stolen glances. He trailed a finger along the carved edge of the table, then traced a line down my wrist. The sensation was electrifying. I turned my palm upward to meet his hand, and he laced our fingers together, thumbs brushing in slow, deliberate circles. "It's so different with you," he murmured, his breath hot against my skin. "No hesitation." I nodded, the heat pooling between my thighs at his nearness. With David, tenderness had been sweet but fleeting. With John, deliberate but restrained. With Michael, every touch was infused with confidence, an expert's ease that coursed through me like wildfire. Before I could think, he stood and pulled me gently to my feet. He pressed a soft kiss to the back of my hand, then beckoned me toward a narrow door at the back of the library. We slipped through into a small reading alcove, where the rain beat softly against leaded glass. Here, with the storm as our backdrop, he cradled my face in both hands, thumbs caressing my cheekbones. His lips met mine in a kiss that was urgent without haste, slow, deep, and entirely consuming. I felt the fire in his body press against mine through layers of clothing, and I responded with equal fervor, my arms wrapping around his neck. Our kisses grew more demanding, more insistent. He guided me to the plush chaise lounge set against the far wall. The upholstery was cool under my skin as he laid me back, his body arching over mine. My heart thundered as he withdrew the satin sash of my uniform, revealing the curve of my waist and the soft swell of my breasts. His hands traced the outline of my body with reverence, as though mapping uncharted territory. His mouth followed, planting kisses along my collarbone, each one kindling flames in places I had never known could burn so brightly. I arched into him, my breath coming in ragged bursts. He knelt between my legs, fingers skimming the lace waistband of my undergarments. The anticipation was exquisite, the promise of release held just beyond reach. But before we moved further, he paused, looking up at me with that warm gaze. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice husky. There was no judgment in his question, only care. I nodded, heart pounding. "I need this." With that, he resumed, sliding fabric aside and exploring with expert touch. Each stroke, each caress was measured and confident, igniting waves of pleasure that built slowly into a crescendo of sensation. I clung to him as my senses dissolved into light and sound, his name a whispered prayer on my lips. When we finally came together, it was in a rush of heat and motion, our bodies moving as one in a dance of release. His hands held me close as my world spun into shards of bliss. I felt his breath on my neck, his hair tickling my ear as he murmured my name in exultation. Afterward, we lay entwined on the chaise, hearts still racing. Candlelight danced across his sweat-slick skin, and I traced lazy patterns on his chest. He brushed a stray lock from my face and whispered, "I've never felt anything so right." I smiled, pressing my cheek against his shoulder. Never have I. That night, as I dressed and slipped away, the sound of his footsteps echoed softly behind me. I stepped back into the hallway with a tremor of satisfaction and longing. The promise of our secret affair shimmered in the rain-washed air. I knew I was playing with fire, yet I craved every spark. Part 10, Conspiracy to Poison. That night, sleep felt impossible. My body still thrummed with the afterglow of our stolen encounter, but my mind raced with a darker pulse. I slipped from my bedchamber into the moonlit corridor, the stone floor cool beneath my slippers. Shadows pooled in the corners, cast by the tall windows framing the placid lake beyond. I moved toward the library where I knew Michael often lingered after hours. I found him there, seated behind his father's massive mahogany desk. The desk lamp was lit, scattering a cone of yellow light onto scattered papers and an open ledger. Michael looked up, his blue eyes gleaming in the lamplight, a half-crooked smile playing on his lips. "You're restless," he observed, gesturing to the empty chair opposite him. I sat, heart hammering as I sensed an undercurrent to his tone. He closed the ledger with a soft thud and leaned forward. "I can't stop thinking about what we shared," I admitted, voice low. He nodded, understanding, then paused as though weighing something heavier. "Mary," he said, meeting my gaze. "There's something I need to discuss. Something necessary?" His expression darkened, and I felt an inexplicable tightening in my gut. Michael's ambition had always flickered behind his warm demeanor, an undercurrent I'd sensed but never named. He rose and walked to the tall bookcase, running a hand over leather spines. Finally, he pulled out a narrow volume and slid it across the desk. I recognized it instantly, a 19th century treatise on toxicology, its pages yellowed and brittle. "I've been planning this for months," he confessed, voice steady yet intense. "My father's fortune is locked away in trust that he can change at a whim, even our relationship is at his mercy. I cannot live in his shadow forever." He opened the toxicology book to a dog-eared page. Under the heading Conia maculatum, there was a formula for a refined poison, odorless, tasteless, undetectable in wine. My pulse surged. Part of me recoiled in horror. Another part, darker, more feral, hummed with excitement. "He's in failing health in the mornings," Michael continued. "A single dose will send him to his bed without suspicion. We proceed carefully. You will poison his wine at dinner tomorrow. I will be elsewhere, but poised." He looked at me with burning intensity. "I want this with you, Mary. I need your help." Silence stretched between us, punctuated only by the ticking of the desk clock. My throat tightened. I thought of David's gentle fumblings, then of John's deliberate passion, and finally of Michael's confident fire. His plan was monstrous, but he was offering me power, ownership of my own fate for the first time. Guilt seared through me, betrayal of the man who had shown me kindness, fatherly care, and newfound ecstasy. Yet desire and ambition intertwined in my chest, urging me forward. "Show me," I whispered. A slow smile curved his lips. He extracted a small vial from the desk drawer, crystal clear, stopper cinched tight. Inside was a liquid as pale as water. "This," he said softly, placing it in my palm, "will change everything." I held the vial, feeling its weight like a promise and a threat. Michael leaned close, scent of his aftershave mingling with the musty pages. He pressed his lips to my temple, then pressed the vial back into my hand. "Together," he breathed, "we'll claim what we deserve." I closed my fingers around the glass. The cool surface touched my skin, and I felt a jolt of resolve entwined with dread. I had crossed an invisible line, but to refuse now would mean returning to powerless longing. "I'm with you," I promised. He captured my hand and kissed it, a gentle gesture that belied the enormity of what we had agreed. Then, for the first time in weeks, I felt something settle in my mind. Purpose. As I left the library, the vial tucked safely in my apron pocket, I glanced back at Michael's silhouette against the warm lamp glow. His head dipped in silent gratitude. Ahead, the corridors lay dark and still, but in the quiet, my heartbeat sounded like war drums. The conspiracy had begun, and with it, the wheel of fate spun inexorably onward. Part 11, The Fatal Dinner. The Gurn dining room was awash in lamplight and candle glow, every surface polished to a mirror sheen. A dozen crystal chandeliers hung overhead, their prisms scattering golden shards of light across the intricately inlaid parquet floor. The long mahogany table groaned under the weight of silver candelabra, fine porcelain service painted with cobalt and gold, and stemware so delicate it looked spun from water. Ahead, floor-to-ceiling windows framed an ink-black lake, its surface still except for the occasional ripple from a gust of wind. I stood silently at the head of the table, clutching a decanter filled with deep ruby Cabernet. The guests had already taken their seats, family attorneys, a distant cousin or two, and the household staff in respectful attendance. Their polite chatter hummed like distant bees, oblivious to the storm gathering between me and the man I called employer. At the foot of the table, John smiled wanly as he inspected the arrangement of platters: roasted pheasant glazed in honey and lavender, wild mushroom risotto crowned with shaved truffle, and a crisp green salad flecked with pecans. He turned to me and his eyes held a warmth that pierced me like a blade. "Mary," he said, voice rich with genuine appreciation, "would you do the honors of pouring the first glass this evening?" My heart thundered in my ears. I forced a steady smile and brought the decanter to his glass, its rim catching the flicker of candlelight. The poison lay invisible at the very bottom, a pale dust that would dissolve unnoticed, hidden by the wine's richness. My hand trembled, but I steadied my elbow and tipped the decanter slowly. The dark liquid lapped into his glass, and I fought the urge to flinch. John lifted the stem and inhaled the aroma. He nodded appreciatively, tracing the glass's curve with a thoughtful fingertip before taking a sip. From the corner of my eye, I saw Michael's silhouette emerge from the shadows. He stood by the double doors, arms folded, his face unreadable in the pool of lamplight. A single nod from him was all I needed to know. The poison would be enough to strike, and the plan was set in motion. John swallowed, set the glass down, and raised his eyes to me. "Excellent vintage," he said. "Thank you, Mary." I inclined my head, words stuck in my throat. The room erupted into polite applause as he lifted his own glass in a toast. To family, to legacy, to the evening's joyous occasion. I watched his lips form a smile, his attention fixed on something beyond me, beyond the table. I tried to focus on the gentle swell of the condolences and small talk, but my world had narrowed to the thin stem of his goblet. Dinner commenced, a symphony of courses and laughter. John conversed with the cousins seated beside him, recounting an old estate anecdote while buttering a slice of fresh brioche. Every gesture he made, the tilt of his head, the curl of his lips, etched itself into my memory. My throat burned with unshed tears, but I forced my jaw still and served the next round of wine to the other guest, my movements precise, almost detached. Michael watched, unwavering, and once in a while our eyes met across the table. In his gaze, I saw triumph mingled with something darker, satisfaction, yes, but also a shadow of remorse. My pulse fluttered as though our shared conspiracy vibrated between us like a secret melody. John leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He coughed softly, a single hoarse sound. Concern rippled through the guests. I stood, poised to pour water, but hesitated as I watched him lift the glass again, his hand unsteady this time, and sip once more. His face paled, and he winced. "John?" Michael's voice cut through the murmurs. He rose and crossed the table in 2 long strides, cradling John's glass as though it were a fragile relic. "Are you all right?" John set the glass down and pressed a hand to his chest. I feel ill." His voice trembled. "Perhaps I ate something wrong." Panic flickered in my chest, but I straightened, stepping forward. My apron felt damp beneath my fingertips. "May I get you some fresh water?" I asked, voice steady despite the cold in my veins. Michael shot me a quick, intense look, half plea, half command, and I nodded. I gestured to a footman who hurried over with his silver pitcher. As water was poured into a fresh goblet, John's breaths came in shallow, rapid bursts. Guests rose, leaning in with solicitous offers. But Michael and I both knew the cause was not food, but the pale dust that had settled silently at the bottom of John's wine glass. I hovered at his side as he pushed away the table and stood with Michael's help. Pale light from the chandelier glinted off the silver, and I silently thanked God that no one suspected the true nature of this collapse. John steadied himself on Michael's arm, and I fetched a chair for him. He sank into it, eyes unfocused. "Someone fetch the doctor," Michael ordered, his voice tight. He didn't look at me, but I felt his gaze like a protective cloak. I slipped away into the shadows near the doorway, watching as the household staff gathered, worry etched on their faces. Behind me, I heard John gasp once, twice, and then slump forward. A scream rose from the gathering crowd. The crystalline note hung in the air like shattered glass. My heart cracked in response. Michael was at my side in an instant, his hand finding mine. He squeezed gently, eyes somber. "It's done," he whispered, as if to himself. I nodded, the taste of betrayal bitter on my tongue. The night closed in around us with a hush of terror and confusion. The poison had claimed its victim, and in that moment I realized the full weight of what we had done. The symphony of the evening had unraveled into a dirge, and the legacy of the lakeside mansion would bear our sin. Part 12. Aftermath and Investigation. I awoke before dawn to the shrill ring of a telephone echoing down the marble corridor. My head throbbed with fatigue and a nausea far greater than any hangover. I stumbled into the foyer just as Michael emerged from the library, his face pale in the wavering lantern light. "He's been taken to St. Agnes," he said quietly, voice grim. Dr. Falk pronounced it poisoning. "They're charging him for observation overnight." My heart seized. Poisoning, my handiwork revealed. My mouth ran dry. I wanted to scream or collapse, but my legs held me upright. Michael's coat brushed mine as he pivoted toward the study. "They found traces in his wine glass," he added, "and they're bringing in detectives this morning." I watched him walk away, each step echoing harshly. The hush of the mansion felt denser, the air thick with suspicion. I fled to my quarters, locked the door, and pressed trembling fingers to my lips. Guilt roared like thunder. By mid-morning, a uniformed detective and a plainclothes officer stood in the foyer. Their polished shoes gleamed on the marble floor. I served them tea, my hands steady, heart fractured. The detective's gaze lingered on my face, then on the overturned goblet on the sideboard. "Miss, do you know if Mr. John dined alone?" he asked, voice courteous but probing. I forced a polite smile. "He dined with family council and—" I paused, thinking of Michael's absence. "Mr. Michael joined him later?" The detective nodded, scribbling notes. "And you, miss, were serving?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." I poured his first glass of wine. His pen froze. "You poured it?" A frown formed. Who else had access to the decanter? I blinked, faltering. "Only Michael and I, no one else." He looked up sharply. "We'll need to search both your quarters and Mr. Michael's room. Just routine, of course." My stomach lurched, but I concealed my panic with a curt nod. "Of course." I guided them through the corridors, each step a hammer blow. The detective lingered by Michael's door as the plainclothesmen looked down hallways. I felt their scrutiny like a vice. In my quarters, they rifled through drawers, overturning linens. My vial lay hidden beneath my pillow, out of sight, but my mind raced. What if they find it? Outside, hushed voices rose as Dr. Falk arrived in a black sedan, the gurney wheeled in by nurses. They loaded John into the ambulance. He lay pale and still, his breathing shallow. I watched, tears threatening, as Michael climbed in beside him. Michael caught my eye, nodded once, and closed the ambulance door. Within the hour, the detective returned to my quarters. "Nothing unusual," he announced, replacing the last drawer. "But we'll be in touch." With that, they left, footsteps receding like a fading storm. Alone, I sank to the floor, back against the wardrobe. Guilt and dread churned within me. I thought of John's gentle eyes when he last thanked me, never knowing how close he came to death at my hand. I thought of Michael's proud smile when I confessed my complicity, and I thought of the future we pledged to each other, tainted now with the stain of blood and betrayal. I stood and wiped my tears, donning my uniform as though armor. I needed to be strong for Michael, for the plan we still had to see through, and for the secret that would bind us in blood. Outside my door, the hush of the mansion had shifted. Whispers passed through hallways, doors closed behind me, eyes narrowed in polite caution. Tonight, I would attend my post at John's bedside in the hospital. I would watch over him, a hypocrite guardian, and ensure his will was updated as Michael and I intended. Then the final pieces of our conspiracy would fall into place, unless fate or the detectives chose to unravel our deadly tapestry first. Part 13. Open-ended finale. The library was bathed by the dim glow of a single cluster of candles. Their flames flickered over rows of leather-bound volumes, casting long shadows that danced across the spines of ancient tomes. A hush lay heavy in the air, broken only by the soft crackle of wax and the distant hoot of an owl beyond the lidded glass windows. Michael and I stood before John's grandfather clock, its pendulum still for the first time in over a century. In our hands, we each held a copy of the new will, signed, sealed, and irrevocable. My fingers trembled as I traced our names, Mary Henderson and Michael Holm, listed as sole heirs. The weight of the paper felt both triumphant and terrible. He stepped closer, the candles illuminating the planes of his face, strong jaw, the hint of a smile playing beneath his calm blue eyes. I realized with a start how much this man had become my world, how our dark bargain had entwined our fates. His gaze met mine, and without a word he folded his arms around me. The silk of his shirt was cool against my heated skin. I leaned into him, allowing myself a single moment of exultation. "We did it," I whispered, voice thick with relief and shame. "It's ours." He pressed a gentle kiss to my temple. "Yes," he murmured, "but at what cost?" The question hung between us, a fragile echo in the candlelit hush. I closed my eyes, remembering John's kind eyes, so trusting, so unaware of my betrayal. A lump formed in my throat, and I drew back enough to meet Michael's gaze. "Michael," I said, voice stuttering, "we knew. We made our choices." He nodded, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face. "I know." He paused, as if measuring the distance between confession and comfort. "We'll be careful now. We'll protect each other." I swallowed hard and placed my hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "Together," I promised. The word tasted both sweet and bitter on my tongue. A sudden breeze drifted in through a slightly open window, snuffing out the smallest candle at the back of the room. The darkness swallowed its corner, flickering uncertainty into the circle of light. Michael's arms tightened around me. I felt the press of his warmth, the strength of his resolve. "We should leave soon," I said. "The investigators, they may still be looking for evidence." My voice quavered as the reality of our vulnerability pressed in. He nodded again, lifting me gently so that I could step away from the desk where the will lay. I gathered the papers with trembling hands and tucked them into my apron pocket, alongside the vial's empty shell I had hidden earlier. The remnants of our conspiracy, testaments to our shared peril. As I rose, our bodies aligned in the hearth's faint glow. Michael reached for my hand, entwining our fingers. "Whatever comes next," he promised, "we face it as one." I felt a spark of hope ignite within me. Yes, our bonds were forged in betrayal, but they were bonds all the same, stronger than fear, more enduring than regret. From the doorway, I glanced back at the grand oil painting of the Tuscan vineyard, an echo of the life we had left behind. Tonight, that world was finished. Ahead lay a new landscape, veiled in shadows, shaped by firelight, where every step could lead to salvation or ruin. Michael leaned down, pressing his lips to mine, a kiss that was both vow and farewell to our old selves. The candlelight danced across his features, illuminating the promise in his gaze. Our hearts beat in unison, a solemn cadence that carried us beyond this room, beyond these walls into a future neither of us could fully imagine. We stepped out together, leaving the candles sputter behind. The last flame guttered, then died, and darkness settled on the library, silent witness to our triumph and the perilous path that waited in its wake. Subscribe and hit the bell to get updates on new story episodes.